if traditional direct air capture would use 100 units, we are aiming at scale to slash that down at least 10 times. The round-trip efficiency of a supercapacitor can reach 99% above. So that would mean that with the right optimization, of course, and at scale, we would be able to slash the energy that is needed for that second step up to hopefully more than 90%. That would be really revolutionary.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Signal. This is a brand new podcast, a spin-off from the main Sustainability in the Air podcast, where we spotlight innovative founders tackling large problems in climate tech with a particular eye on transport and aviation. I'm Dirk Singer. I'm the co-author of the Sustainability in the Air series of books, along with Shashank Nigam, who many of you will know as Simplifying's founder and the host of the main Sustainability in the Air podcast. Now, one of the things I've been looking at over the past 2 to 3 years is climate tech startups, and in particular, why some succeed and why many don't. As part of that, I've had the chance to meet some really amazing people and to feature some intelligent and innovative founders on our blog and newsletter. And among other things, this podcast is a chance to give them a voice on a new platform and to amplify their voices to a wider audience. So for this first episode, we're going to look at the carbon removal space and in particular direct air capture. Now, direct air capture, or DAC, is a subset of carbon removals, and in its simplest terms, it involves building machines that suck carbon dioxide out of the air, and that CO2 can either then be used in products like fuels, or it can be stored underground. Now, let's be honest. I mean, carbon dioxide removal and direct air capture are incredibly controversial topics. It's something where whenever I post about it, it's like a swarm of angry wasps in my comments. Now, there are many detractors. They have reasons. There's a genuine feeling that direct air capture is too expensive, energy intensive, that it's a distraction that draws renewable resources where they could be better used. Some argue that it's being promoted by big oil, which is an investor in the sector, to delay real climate action. But here's why it matters. Captured CO2 is, as I said, essential ingredients for fuels, in particular e-fuels, the third generation of aviation and maritime fuels that offer carbon dioxide life cycle reductions of 90% or more. It can also be stored underground, creating carbon removals credits that airlines are increasingly buying to meet their net zero commitments. We've actually produced an explainer mini report alongside this podcast that shows exactly how airline groups are working in the carbon removal space, and you can find that linked in the show notes. So, today's Signal comes via two brilliant young women based in Paris, the founders of a startup called Norma. They say they figured out how to address the biggest criticism of direct air capture, namely energy consumption. Silvia Pugliese and Monica Larrazabal are the only all-female founding team amongst the 150-odd direct air capture startups in existence today. Without further ado, let's find out how they're planning to revolutionize one of climate tech's most challenging sectors. So I'm here with Silvia Pugliese and Monica Larrazabal, the co-founders of Norma, a direct air capture company doing something very, very different, which is why I was really keen to talk to them. Now, most DAC companies have accepted that pulling CO2 from the air is going to involve a lot of energy use and high costs. And that's one of the reasons why this sector has been so controversial. But the two of you have figured out how to cheat on that energy requirement. Just give me a brief layperson's overview of what did you discover and what's everyone else missed?
So what did we discover? Well, we kind of figured out how to reuse most of the energy for the process that we were trying to develop. As you said correctly, direct air capture has these one huge problems. There are, different others, but the main one is the energy demand. We really wanted to tackle that, and we really tried to work around the problem. A process involves reactions, chemical reactions that require energy. So we asked ourselves, we necessarily have to go down the pathway to, do some chemical reactions, but can we somehow be creative about that?
Right.
Can we somehow reuse the energy that we are spending for these chemical reactions and steps of the process? And so we figured out that there is this interesting technology called the supercapacitors. There's the interesting applications. It's an energy storage technology. And we asked ourselves, could we somehow get inspired from that technology? And can we fuse somehow direct air capture and CO2 capture with such energy storage device with supercapacitors? So that's what we did. We managed now to get two birds with one stone by capturing CO2 and reusing the energy that we spend during the process.
Okay, so help me kind of understand this simply. I mean, when I think of a supercapacitor, I mean, you mentioned phones. I think of fast phone charging. How do you get from there to revolutionizing carbon capture?
Yeah, it's a it's a quite a complicated pathway. So, but we can make it simple.
Yes, go for it.
Energy storage devices. The two main energy storage devices are batteries and supercapacitors.
Mm-hmm.
We are, in general, more used to interact with batteries. Batteries are in our phones, in our laptops, and we charge them. They require a little bit of time to be charged, and they deliver us the energy that we need. Supercapacitors do the same, but can do it faster.
Okay.
They also store energy. I'm simplifying here, of course.
Of course.
Now, if a supercapacitor is able to capture the energy, and it does it by moving around ions in a solution. Now, we just thought about, well, CO2 capture also requires moving ions and in a solution. Can we somehow put together these two things? And that's how basically the technology has developed. The technology uses a concept that's used within supercapacitor, that is electrostatics. We basically created a new device that is a hybrid device and can capture the CO2 while storing the energy.
So this is like you're creating a DAC facility that's basically like a rechargeable battery that captures CO2.
Kind of. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Imagine a facility, and imagine that within this facility there are a lot of boxes. Each of these boxes, it's around, I don't know, something like half of your desk in size.
Okay.
And this box is made of several stacks. And these stacks are able to capture the CO2 and at the same time store the energy that is needed while doing this process. Out of the box goes pure CO2. So what these boxes are doing actually is they get the air inside and the CO2 comes in almost pure outside. And this process of absorbing and desorbing CO2, of course, requires some energy. This box is able to keep the energy that is inputted and reuse it for another cycle. In other words, you can, go on and on and on and on with several cycles of absorption and desorption of concentrated CO2.
Okay, amazing. And that also answers my question about what does this actually look like, because I'm aware in this industry, you have on one end, you have the likes of Climeworks and 1.5 with their giant industrial facilities. On the other hand, and I've spoken to a Dutch company recently that told me they were doing DAC units the size, I think I was told the size of my lower leg. So you are kind of somewhere on the lower end, not quite that small, but like the monitor that I've got in front of me, which is like a 21-inch monitor about half the size of my desk, as we say.
Exactly. That's what we call modularity, and that's what we think is very, very important within this industry.
Okay, perfect. Monica, let's turn to you. You, I believe, are ex-McKinsey. You went to MIT Business School, and you've also worked with a company in this space, quite a well-known one called Heirloom. Sylvia, you have a PhD in chemistry. You've been working on these technologies for years. Monica, why don't you just give me the origin story? How is it that the two clever young women ended up taking on this massive challenge together? How did you get to where you are today?
Totally. Pleasure to talk about this little love story between Sylvia and I as co-founders.
Go for it.
Sylvia has she's been for 10 years dealing with the molecules from the atmosphere. She's actually she started another company in the methane capture space. So is an innovator with hunger to get those technologies out of the lab and into the world. Myself, you talked a little bit about my background, and in the last 4 years, I've been completely obsessed with the carbon removal, as you mentioned. I started in this world with Heirloom, direct air capture company. I've also worked in the marine space, direct ocean capture, ocean alkalinity enhancement. So, discussed with many founders, analyzed all technologies, quite a nerd. For me, it's very clear that we are in the innovation decade. There's so many solutions, right? And we need still radically new solutions. This has been very clear to me since I started in the industry. I always say that it feels, like it must have felt in the 60s or 70s when renewable energy types were being created and discussed, right? And we still need to find the solar PV of carbon capture. So I was looking for the solar PV of carbon capture, and I found Sylvia and her amazing technology. But also, we really clicked around a lot of ideas of how to disrupt the sector, how to build how to disrupt the industry. So it was a click at the technology level, but also at the vision level.
Okay, and obviously you mentioned you worked at Heirloom, which is a very well-known company at this space. I mean, what lessons did you bring back from there, and what did you see from the established players that could be done differently?
Lessons, so many. I only did my MBA internship there, and in 3 months, I have so many learnings, and I'm so grateful for that company that is indeed is doing great, and there's. I'd say one of my main lessons is that this is a moonshot, and you need to think big. That's something that Heirloom was doing right from the beginning, and I think it's key to their success. And it's something that is very similar in the way we think about things at Norma. That's why we're doing, not incremental changes to things. We're thinking something radically from scratch.
Right.
Yeah. So that's something that I always take from that time.
Okay. Let's move on to the $1 million question. So the numbers, and this is obviously where the industry. I mean, Sylvia, you mentioned all the way at the start, gets criticized. In terms of energy use and in terms of cost. Now, not to kind of to put this into two simple terms, but let's say that traditional DAC, so the DAC industry units that are out today, if they use 100 units of energy, what kind of saving or what kind of efficiency are we looking at? I mean, if either of you want to take that.
If traditional direct air capture would use 100 units, we are aiming at scale to slash that down at least 10 times.
Wow.
This is because, again, to understand the reason why we would be able to do so. I always think about this picture. So imagine direct air capture processes. They are made of course, we are simplifying, 3 steps. The first step is you need to contact the air with your system, and that requires energy. The second step is you need to catch the CO2 and you need to desorb the CO2. You need to get it back, concentrated, of course. The third step generally is you need to do something with your CO2. You can compress it and you can put it somewhere else. Now, of these three steps, what is very, very energy intensive is the second one, is how to capture and get back CO2 in a concentrated form. And that's where exactly we are acting. Norma's technology with our feature of reusing the energy is slashing that energy requirements down very, very much. And when I say very much, I'm talking about the round trip efficiency of a supercapacitor can reach, commercial supercapacitor can reach 99% above. So that would mean that with the right optimization, of course, and at scale, we would be able to slash the energy that is needed for that second step up to hopefully more than 90%. So that would be really revolutionary. It would be really something that's completely different from the previous processes.
That is really quite astonishing. So what does that mean in terms of cost? I mean, you'll be well aware that there's this figure that's constantly bandied around, which I guess comes from a U.S. Department of Energy report that was done a number of years ago, and now it seems to have just been taken by a gospel that we have to reach it below $100 per ton of carbon. When I speak to some founders in this space, I'm told this is ludicrous, and this was plucked out of the air. We're never going to get there. However, I have spoken to one Irish company which claims to have reached between 100 and 200 euros within the lab, so not within the field. And there's an Israeli company that claims that it can even achieve 70 euros. Where do you stand on this?
So I would, thanks for the question. This is the contentious question. I think the DAC industry does have a history of over-promising a little bit. We've seen countless examples of, yes, we can get to, well, I'm not saying that company is over-promising, but I'm very excited if that's the case. Let's go and scale the $70 per ton. That happens with cost, and that also happens with speed of scale. We will have, megatons by this year, gigatons in 2030. So that's something that we are quite conscious of. So we are very excited about our technology, and for sure we have very exciting projections that can go extremely low. But we want to be cautious of how we treat that excitement, and we think if we just give the headline of our technology can get to $80 per ton is a little bit. It doesn't help the sector, because it is a moonshot. There's a lot of work to get there. So there's work in the lab, there's work in engineering, in scaling up, and we need to understand the implications of that overpromising. That said, I won't give numbers, but I'll say that we have very exciting projections in our Excel files for sure. Our techno-economic analysis are very exciting, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're getting quite a lot of traction with our pre-seed round with Contract, and we've secured MilkyWire as a client. But I would also question, is that $100 that once many years ago the DOE put out there, is that going to be it? A lot of CDR quality solutions that we believe are going to be scaling, like good quality biochar is more around $150 per ton. Enhanced rock weathering, which should totally scale up, is more significantly more expensive than that. So we believe that we will be competing with all of these CDR technologies in the CDR space, and that we also have interesting business cases because we are producing CO2 to utilize it. So we can also do something with that CO2. And even point source carbon capture is also an option for a technology like ours. So plenty of space for a technology like Norma's.
Yeah, and I think that that's fair enough because, I guess the last thing you want is that, in 5 years' time, when you've raised $500 million and you have, sort of facilities all over the world, is for someone to go back and to say, Monica, you said in September 2025, you said that you're going to do X, and and you haven't achieved that. And you're right. There are, unfortunately, in the climate tech space, and I understand why, because, we're all in the business of trying to raise investment, and to raise investment, you have to, make some bullish suggestions, but there is, of course, a danger that several years down the line, that comes back to bite you, and and the consequence could be quite significant from that.
I also think that the industry is getting more sophisticated and is getting mature, and the messages and the way we talk about it should evolve and should mature also with that. So I totally understand. I mean, I was part of that narrative when I started. It was totally it's kind of, let's paint a graffiti. That actually know a company that have like a graffiti on their facilities that says like, let's get to $100 per ton. You need
wow.
You need this. It's Octavia, by the way. I don't think this is confidential. They're super proud of it, and they
okay.
have that. I don't know why I didn't say their name, but in their facility in Nairobi, they have this wonderful graffiti, and it's super cool. This is part of it. It's you need to shoot for the shoot for the stars in order to get to the moon. So it's super important, but as the industry matures, we need to mature the messaging. And
I understand. And it's interesting that you say that about Octavia, who I've spoken to. I mean, I've spoken to Martin, the CEO of Octavia. And I guess that, you could argue there is a case for making a bold motivational statement that reminds everyone who goes to work there every day of what it is that they're actually trying to achieve.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I love the graffiti. It's super cool.
Excellent. Well, if I'm ever in Nairobi, I will want to sort of to go and see that for myself. So let's sort of move back to both of you. I mean, obviously, you are, you're two young women, you're working climate tech, you're taking on one of climate tech's biggest challenges in a field that's dominated by older male-led companies with hundreds of millions of dollars. Just kind of talk me through some of the challenges and opportunities, and the perspective that you bring that's different to theirs.
I've been through, several years now of working in climate tech and climate related technologies. I started with methane, then I kind of wanted to get better at CO2. And what I've seen during these years, what I haven't seen much of, I would say, during these years is female-led hardware startups, deep tech startups. It is true that it is still a field dominated by male-led companies.
Yes.
So my biggest challenge, I would say, during these years was I have to be an example for other girls and for other women coming after, and at the same time, who can I look at? Who can I take
so you like your role model?
Who's gonna be my role model? Of course, the industry itself is an example, but I got inspired from many fantastic women that did science, that were inventors and were super creative, and yeah, so that was my way to go. I feel like it's still not a clear pathway, but maybe Monica, you have other.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on your thoughts that we're actually in our offices there in the center of Paris in Chemie Paris Tech. And we have the Museum of Marie Curie there, so we are perfect example of a classic scientist that has is a big reference. For sure, we want other new names. But anyways, yeah, I think my 2 cents on this. I mean, the challenges are obvious. We are and role models, as Silvia was saying, is a very clear one. But I would like to also add a little bit on the opportunities. This is a new industry, like it has been created literally like in the last 5 years, and it's a clear moonshot. So it needs new and old blood, and it needs a lot of really fresh talent. And actually, one of the opportunities that this is giving, that Sylvia and I have, we are clearly very rare, and this actually attracts a lot of talent that they're like, hell yeah, I want to also revolutionize the sector and do something extremely different.
Amazing.
And this is exactly what we need, right? We're doing every day, we are doing things that have never been done before. So we really need this spark, this new fresh blood, and I mean, we need to mix it with the old blood as well, because this is we need of the history and the talent of many industries that will influence that will have a role to play in the carbon industry.
Right.
But yeah, the freshness for sure is an important an important factor.
I just want to ask a follow-up to that. I mean, you're obviously, you're based in the center of Paris. You came out of Marble, the sort of the climate tech accelerator. Do you think it's easier for both of you, or for young women such as yourselves, in a European context compared to a US context, whether you have a view on that? Like, if you had been, doing this in San Francisco or in Silicon Valley, what do you think would have been some of the challenges? Do you think it would be easier, more difficult, or it doesn't really matter?
I think it's similar. So, like, whenever I go to a conference in San Francisco or in Paris, there's a lot of men around, and that's kind of similar. So, I don't see particular difference between the EU and the US in that sense.
Yeah, on a women perspective, I tend to agree with Monica. On a tech development perspective, we know it's a fact that there are different perceptions and different way of doing things in Europe and in the US, and they are both valid approaches. It's just about what one prefers, I would say. So yeah, there are definitely differences.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you very much. So we mentioned Marble. So let's move on to funding. And you just recently closed a funding round. One of the with the VCs I saw was Contrarian VC, who are known for quite rigorous DAC diligence. They led your funding. You've also had a deal with MilkyWire. I know Robert Höglund quite well, who selected you from countless applicants. Talk me through what kind of attracted these investors to yourselves.
So I would say it's quite clear that it's the fact that it's fundamental innovation and not incremental. We are kind of opening a new, very attractive, potentially completely revolutionary thing, and that's that's what the industry need. It's right now we are in that phase of the industry where we need all of the innovation. So I would say that's one. I would say the second is we are really building a team first. We have the team at the center of our every night and day. And because we're very, very conscious of the massive challenge that this is, and that is absolutely essential. I think with Sylvia's experience, second company, like we are having an extremely rigorous R&D roadmap and depth to innovate, to do something for the first time. And then because we understand how the industry has been built so far, we are able to be very, to learn from experience and put up like a business plan also that in this very challenging industry, because we're not only creating a company, we're creating an industry at the same time.
Right.
We are able to play with the times and sing with that at the right rhythms.
Just a kind of a follow up. I mean, we talked about realism a few minutes ago, and and how in the earlier days, you would have had to spray on the graffiti, as it were. Do you think that venture capitalists are getting and investors that they're getting more attuned to sort of to the dangers of overpromising and demand more realism as opposed to sort of big splashy headlines and promises that in 5 years' time might come to nothing?
The answer is yes. Everyone, similarly to the messaging maturing, the investors mature, the startup mature, and everyone, it's, to put it in the words of Andrew, our investor at Counteract. DAC is getting. Oh wait, I think I forgot the harder but better. That's
harder but better.
That's right. The way you put it. Harder, right. Because we all know how to analyze it better and we know how to ask the right questions. But there's also a history of, more innovators doing this more rigorously and better, and, with building on, not only assumptions on, I mean, it's always assumptions on an Excel file. That's the beginning of any business, but maybe assumptions are a little bit more rooted in feasibility studies and in something a little bit more solid. So harder but better.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to transportation and airlines in particular. I mean, after all, this podcast is called Sustainability in the Air, and airlines need CO2 for e-fuel production. And of course, the European Union and the UK do have an e-fuels sub-mandate where a certain amount of fuel consumed will have to come from power to liquid or e-fuels. How does your technology fit into this? I mean, especially the fact that you offer significant efficiencies in terms of energy and, relate to that in costs, can it help solve the decarbonization puzzle? And how soon are we talking about? Like, when can we possibly expect to see, sort of an e-fuel with your cells sort of providing the CO2 being produced?
Yes, totally. So the airlines need massive CO2 amounts, and we are making it cheaper. That's how we interact with this. Now, I'll get a little bit on kind of like the controversial topics and put myself in the shoes of the airlines and think what might they be thinking. So
okay, go for it.
Airlines need to be making choices, right? Like, do they do electrofuels? So that would mean using the CO2 with some hydrogen and producing those electrofuels, or do we use current fuels and we use CDR to neutralize it or compensate it? It's very important to look at this from like an economic analysis. So what is going to be cheaper? So there's some studies, and I'm thinking one that Robert Hoagland from MilkyWire did that kind of hints that actually it's the second. It might be cheaper to offset with CDR, because the cost of hydrogen actually really influences the cost of electrofuels. However, airlines don't love that because they have a lot of pressure to actually decarbonize with a fuel. I actually also, intuitively, without looking at the economics analysis and the numbers, that sounds like a better thing. And then there are other things in the mix that you should throw. So, for example, I think this week there was an article by Nature published by the Financial Times that actually said, hey, there's not so much storage in the world globally available as we might have think. By the way, I think even still that storage capacity will make this industry get to gigaton levels. But anyway, my point is that there's airlines have choices to make, and there's many considerations right now that pull in different directions. I'm not going to weigh in because I'm not an analyst, an expert on this topic, and there's many things that are outside of my technical expertise. I think what I'm seeing from this analysis that there's still a lot of uncertainties and dependencies on things that are like innovation breakthroughs, and that we still don't know. We don't know the cost of hydrogen. We don't know what the cost of CO2 at scale, even if solutions like Norma are extremely promising. But what I know is that in any case we need carbon capture. It is a part of the solution in all of the above. And what I was saying at the beginning, airlines need massive amounts of CO2. So that's we see a lot of value in our versatility at Norma. We have direct air capture and storage. We have possibilities of what to do with direct air capture and storage, utilization, even point source grid solutions because of the energy storage component. So it's very important that companies in this uncertainty think about their versatility, and that's how we position ourselves. I would say, message to the airlines, because they have a tough job with all of these choices. On my point of view would be, don't have analysis paralysis. You need to move, and you should not be closing the doors to something that might be in your future. So, move and bet and start moving, because the climate crisis is not waiting, and we need all of the solutions and the above. To your question of when, maybe to finish with that one. As I was saying, this is a little bit the decade of innovation, and in the 2030s is where we'll be really the decade of scaling up operations. So I would say that in that decade we will definitely see some CO2 playing from Norma playing a role with the airlines.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to that. And maybe to close the question. I mean, surely it's not a question of either or. It's a question of and, which I think is what you're trying to say. So if we take a concrete example, IAG, which is obviously the owner of both Iberia and British Airways, they are doing both. I mean, they've got offtake agreements with 12 and Infinium, two very large power to liquid fuel companies. And they also, in their strategy, they also have an allowance for storage and buying credits for that. And really, that's what we have to do, and use every tool in the toolbox and use technology such as yours, in the most optimum way, and to explore all of the options.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about the competitive landscape. We've talked about a few of the competitors already, but you do have, on the bigger scale, you have companies such as Climeworks that have got years head start and have raised hundreds of millions. Is it even $1 billion? I think close to that in funding. How do you compete with these with these industry giants?
I would say that first of all, it's not a competition. I'm so glad Climeworks started this, paved the pathway. We have to think about historically. Well, we talk about history, but it's just really like a few years ago. A few years ago, a bunch of visionaries, pioneers decided, hey, let's try to build something to capture CO2 from the atmosphere, from other sources. They paved the way, and they were, Climeworks and a bunch of others. They started this sort of rush, because that's how I see it. It's a rush to build the biggest facility, to build the biggest machine for capturing CO2. And I think that's fair. I think that's what happens when a technology is being developed, is being studied. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of rush. There's a lot of excitement, and that's totally fair, and that's totally what needs to happen. Now, when we learn from this, after a few years, after spending money and energies on these first experiments, let's say, and trials, then that's where things start to get a little bit less complex. We start simplifying. This is how I see and how I feel that technologies generally develop. There's a first phase in which there's a lot of confusion and a lot of complexity, but then slowly, as we understand things better, they get simple and more simple, until we get to a point in which we can do things quite easily and in an elegant way, I would say.
Right.
When we reach that point, it means that we really have understood how to do something. So to answer your question, there is, for us, really no competition. It's a story of trials and trying to get to that understanding. And we are really, really happy that Climeworks did what they did, because they taught us, they gave us so many information that now we can use. Now, what we are trying to do, what Norma is trying to do, is in 2025, we believe that there is we should not rush too much in building huge facilities, if these huge facilities are going to be extremely expensive and extremely complex to manage. So this is where we differ a little bit from, Climeworks and who came before us. Instead of learning by, of course, scaling up, which is very important, we need to, first of all, try to learn by optimizing, and instead of scale fast, we should try to scale well. That's what we're trying to do. And that requires money, of course, as much as trying to scale up a technology. But we think that with these premises, this should be something that's possible, and we have people that think the same. So, yeah.
So let's kind of take the sort of flip the whole issue of timing. It's 2025, and someone said to me recently, if we look at 2030, I believe that what I was told is that in infrastructure terms, 2030 is yesterday. So we're running out of time. We have, a generation before we, in theory, have to meet the Paris targets or not. Give me a kind of an idea of how things are working now in an ideal world for you. If you look at 2025, 2027, 2030, I mean, what does the roadmap for yourselves look like over the coming years?
Yeah. So I totally agree with the 2030s yesterday, and we want to scale well, but that doesn't mean that we're gonna be slower. We're trying all that we can to go as fast as possible, because we know that this is a race against time as well, because we know what we need to do. So within our roadmap, how does it look like? Well, we have two parallel pathways that we are taking, and one is optimizing, so get better at our performance, and the other one is get bigger, so trying to capture more CO2, and we are trying to make the first one, so the get better part right now more important, more strong in our pathway in these first years, because of what we said about scaling well. That would mean that next year we're gonna work on a pilot for our technology. In 2029, we can aim at our first commercial facility, And then in 2030, we're going to try to get to a bigger scale. So I would say 2029, 2030 is really when we're going to start, having commercial traction and trying to capture, megatons of CO2. It's not a lot. It's not a lot of time. That's true. But we should try to get there, with by any means.
It's 2025 today. I was told that not so long ago that in infrastructure terms, 2030 is like yesterday. And, we're obviously running out of time, and we have 25 years to, a generation to meet the Paris goals, or not, as the case may be. Kind of talk me through your roadmap over the coming years, and how you you bridge that time pressure that we're all under, and some of the achievements that you hope to have had, if we look at 2025, 2027, 2030 and onwards.
Yeah. So definitely this is a rush against time. We know that we need to get to meaningful amounts of CO2 capture in a few years. However, because we want to scale well, and not too fast, we need to really be mindful of how we, optimize our technology in the next few years. So we have these two pathways in Norma that are parallel. One is getting better, so optimizing the KPIs and the performance of the technology, and the other one is, of course, understanding and learning by scaling, which is getting bigger. Now, in the first few years, 2025, 2026, we're really, really going to index a lot on optimizing that performance. Because if the performance is really good, then there is a risk in scaling up, but the risk is I would say somehow minor. So in 2026, we are planning to build our pilot. We have right now our bench scale demonstrator that is in our labs, and it's, I would say, the dimension of a little fridge. So our pilot is gonna be way bigger, and is gonna capture in the order of tons of CO2 per year, and it's gonna be in 2026. And in the years after, I would say the biggest, we're gonna build different facilities, but the biggest milestone is gonna be around 2029, 2030, where we're gonna have our first of a kind facility. Then in the years that follow, I would say 2035 ish, we're gonna try to really get to those meaningful amounts of CO2 capture, so in the order of megaton. But it's a long way.
That was Silvia Pugliese and Monica Larrazabal from Norma, demonstrating why this is such an exciting time in this sector. When you can take a fundamental technology like supercapacitors and reimagine it for carbon capture, you get the kind of breakthrough that really could reshape an entire industry. Now, what struck me about Norma isn't just their technical approach, it's how they're thinking about building a company. They're not rushing to build massive facilities like their competitors. Instead, they're focused on getting the technology right first, then scaling smart with modular systems that could be deployed anywhere. And I was struck that even though they have some pretty revolutionary claims, they were actually keen not to be burned later by making further big headline statements now, which is something that's very common among startups looking to raise funding. They were refreshingly honest about the industry's history of overpromising, while still obviously conveying genuine excitement about their projections. And I am convinced that we'll be hearing much more about this all-female startup team over the next 5 or 10 years. Next month in October, I'm talking to a founder who has been called a candidate for the world's first sargassum billionaire, a fascinating story about turning ocean waste into opportunity. If you're working on a breakthrough technology, or if you know someone who is, please reach out. I'm always looking for the next signal in the noise. Until the next time, this is Dirk Singer, and keep innovating.